Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Poland Daily History. Today we are at Hotel Europejskie, one of the most expensive hotels in all of Poland. The secret to keeping such a prestigious status relies on preserving history and providing luxurious accommodation. Today we will learn more about one of the most exclusive jewels of Warsaw.
Our guest today is Mr. Ksawery Wąsowski, a direct descendant of Aleksander Przeździecki, who decided to build Warsaw's first luxury hotel of international standards in 1855. After returning to Poland from the US in the early 90s, Mr. Wąsowski has been documenting the long and interesting history of Hotel Europejski.
Let's start from the beginning of things. As I know, your great-great-grandfather made the decision to build this hotel, and I was wondering if you can give us a little bit of background and how he came to the decision.
Sure. He was a world traveler. He had been in Western Europe, various capitals, and he had seen how the hotels had been newly built in mid-19th century, and he realized that Warsaw, being the kind of center of crossroads here from what was the Russian Empire and the West, that it didn't have such a hotel. So he decided that it would need something like that. And since he had the capital to be able to fund such a place, when he came back to Warsaw, he started looking for areas where it would be possible to build such a hotel. And here on Krakowskie Przedmieście was the main thoroughfare leading from one rail station on one side of the river to the other side. Right. And since there was no railway bridge to connect, passengers had to get off and rest usually from their long journeys. So the hotel being along this tract was the perfect spot to put it, and there happened to be opportunity for real estate opening up, and so he bought the place. And over the next couple of years, along with some new compatriots who also funded this enterprise, they built the hotel.
So I would imagine that this hotel would be in a different standard as opposed to the other ones that are existing in Warsaw. Can you tell me a little bit about the difference between the hotel here, between the ones with the other places?
Sure. A hotel as we know it today didn't really exist in the mid-19th century. No. These were more or less what we call maybe rooming houses, where people would come, and the building did not have all the amenities that we consider as normal for today. For instance, they didn't have a restaurant. They didn't have, let's say, a hairdresser or other shops that would be included in hotels today. These were some of the ideas that were implemented in the first grand hotels in the mid-19th century. Another detail, which is kind of odd today when you think about it, when guests came to these so-called rooming houses, they had to bring their own linens. The establishment would not provide that. So you had to bring your own sheets, your pillowcases or whatnot, your towels, and so that was the standard. So when the Hotel Europejski was built, all that was included, right. Including baths. Many times these rooming houses didn't have baths. You would have to, for a bath, you would have to go to the bathhouse, which would be a totally separate place. So all these amenities started to be put into the one building. Right. So guests, when they came, they really did feel like they were being treated luxuriously, right. Because everything that they had to look for elsewhere or bring them with themselves was in one spot.
Right, so essentially this is like the first place where everything is in a single package.
Exactly, exactly. Right. Let's say that was the 5-star treatment back then, to have linens actually on the bed and not having to bring them with you.
Since we're going back to the beginning, let's talk about the architecture of the place and how it was built, and go into a little bit more of the detail of the construction of things. Can you tell me a little bit about those?
Sure. Aleksander Przeździecki, when he was traveling, and also his relatives, the aristocracy at the time, they saw the architecture that was abroad. They were great fans of Italian architects. Many of them, for centuries really, had imported Italian architects to design either their mansions or their various buildings, or even whole towns, as in the case of Zamość. So Aleksander Przyjdziecki invited Henryk Marconi, an Italian architect who actually moved to Warsaw and designed many buildings in Poland. Here in the immediate vicinity of the Hotel Europejski, he designed the Towarzystwo Kredytowe on Kredytowa Street. In the Ogród Saski, the fountain that we see today, and the water tower that's in the park.
Right.
That was his designs just a couple of years before the Hotel Europejski. He was a big fan of neoclassical architecture from Rome, from Venice. So the details that we see throughout the building, the columns on the outside, the structure, the intervals of the windows and whatnot, come from various palaces in Rome, for instance, the Palazzo Farnese, or in Venice, Palazzo Corner. So some of the details, like for instance, on the one wing where you have double columns between the windows,
right.
That's precisely a copy from Palazzo Corner in Venice. So it's almost this copy-paste that he did to good effect. This was a unique building because it was a whole city block. So he designed the whole thing as one unit. It wasn't just part of a facade of a running order of other buildings.
Right.
So in that respect, it was unique.
Mm-hmm. It's not like a mix and match of things, a whole block.
Right, and also by copying, I think the copy-paste factor he did to good use, because there's a symbiosis to all these elements. They work together. The fact that the rounded corners have been designed in such a way and are incorporated as we are in this room, one of the corner rooms. It is unique and it worked very well. And when the hotel went up, let's say the first part of the opening was 1857 on January 1st, already you could see at that point this was a big improvement on any other building. It was a grand event. It was a unique thing.
Even if the part of Poland which had been partitioned by the Russian Empire was not benefiting economically from being occupied by a foreign power, Warsaw was growing rapidly by the end of the 19th century. The city's location made it serve as a hub for people traveling between cities such as Berlin, Vienna, and St. Petersburg. The need of a modern hotel for well-off travelers was increasingly growing. What kind of city is Warsaw like during the time, and what kind of activities can the guests expect to have, and what kind of social life do they enjoy?
We look back into people's memoirs and writings to see that. But Warsaw back then, as many cities, cultural life and social life was much different. There was not so many distractions as we have today. People would, let's say, take more walks. The parks were frequented more. Pastry shops, coffee shops were very popular. So the ones that appeared here in the hotel, first Conti, then Czernet, and then finally Lux, which was quite famous, they were centers of social life. Also, people loved art more, it seemed. And there were art galleries that were popping up everywhere. A very famous one, the Krywulta Gallery, opened here in 1880. And that was in a hotel for 20 years. So every Sunday, let's say after church, people would go on their stroll and they would come visit the art gallery, or they would go to the pastry and coffee shops, and they would just spend their time there.
What kind of guests frequent the hotel at the time? Are they more international or just within the realms of Warsaw and Poland as a whole?
From the records we have, there was a mix. Poles, lots of Poles came, foreigners. Warsaw was a crossroads. There was people traveling from Petersburg, Moscow to the west. Warsaw was the westernmost large city of the Russian Empire. We mustn't forget that.
Right.
And immediately to the west, we have Berlin. Onwards, we have Paris. And so there was a lot of traffic going back and forth. So Warsaw had a complete mix. And Poles from the various divided sections of Poland at that time also visited. So there was a complete mix.
Right, so essentially the place served as a hub for travelers going in all sorts of directions, pretty much.
It was a hub. When you look at the railroad maps at that time, you see that pretty much all roads went through Warsaw to get to the west. There wasn't any others except far away, but you really had to go through Warsaw to get either east or west.
So this served as a very advantageous position, I would imagine.
It was, and also it was probably the most liberal of the cities in the Russian Empire, since it was closest to the west, and the Poles were never people that were to be put down or held down. They always had their independent spirit. So there was a sense of freedom that was certainly for the Russians that came that Warsaw offered.
Hotel Europejskie has 150 years and counting of very interesting history. And the fact that the history is preserved and the personal touch of the place is what gave it the standard for the best hotel in Poland and has set the standard ever since. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. I'll see you next time on Poland Daily History.